Hi, I'm Jordan Boyd-Graber.
And I'm Mohit Iyer.
We're working together as part of a team that's trying to get computers to understand quiz bowl questions.
One challenge is that computers need to know what entities are being asked about and which parts of the text refer to them.
For example, in this question, this author, her in the phrase her book, and this Southern author of the short stories Petrified Man and Why I Live at the P.O. all refer to the same person, the answer of this question, Eudora Welty. We want to teach a computer how to know when different words and phrases are talking about the same thing. This problem is called Coreference Resolution. To train a computer to do this, we need examples that it can learn from. This is where you come in. So let's say that we want to annotate this author in the first sentence as being co-referent with this author in the second sentence, which means that they're referring to the same thing. We can highlight the text, this author, and press 1 on our keyboard to indicate that it belongs to coreference group 1. Then we can select this author in the second sentence and press 1 on our keyboard again to indicate that it belongs to the same group. In general, the number or letter that you choose for your coreference group doesn't matter unless it's group 1. Group 1 indicates that the text you've highlighted is coreferent with the answer of the question. So let's do an example where the text isn't coreferent with the answer. So we can highlight her best known novel here and press 2 to indicate that it belongs to a different group. And highlight Delta Wedding, which that refers to, and also press 2. All of your coreferences will be saved immediately, and you can go back to previously tagged questions at any time. If you marked a question with the wrong group, you can simply press a new group key to re-tag your last selected coreference without having to manually delete the coreference and select the phrase again. So as an example, I just highlighted Delta Wedding and pressed 2, but if I press 3, it'll change what group Delta Wedding belongs to. Similarly, if I want to delete one of my previously tagged coreferences, I can press the X to the left of it on this panel, like so. There's also, on certain questions, the option to check your accuracy. What this does is compare your annotations on the question to a reference set of annotations that we've created and know are correct. So if I click the Check Accuracy button, it'll tell me that I got this one correct. Even if a word or phrase is not coreferent with any other text in the question, it may still be useful for automatic coreference modeling. Since this is a literature dataset, we ask that you annotate all authors, literary works, and characters, regardless of whether or not they are coreferent with anything else in the text. So as an example, we see that the title here, Petrified Man, a literary work, is not co-referred to anywhere else in this question, but we still want to highlight it, so we select it and press 3. Similarly, Why I Live at the P.O. is referenced nowhere else in the question, but since it's a literary work, we want to annotate it, and so we can press 4. One additional feature of this application is that we allow nested coreferences. So let's go back to our answer coreference group, and let's say we want to tag this whole phrase, this Southern author of the short stories Petrified Man and Why I Live at the P.O. So I can highlight all of that text and press 1, and it still saves my nested annotations underneath.
Now that Mohit has introduced how you annotate questions, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail to hopefully answer some of the questions that you might have. In particular, I'll talk about the entities that you should be marking, how much text you should mark, and some of the logistics of the competition. First, what kind of entities are we interested in? A mantra that you should repeat to yourself as you're going through this process is the thing that you're marking an author, a literary work, a character, or an answer to the question? These are the things that you should be marking. For example, here are several mentions of the author Mark Twain. He wrote a scathing critique of the Deerslayer, his journey to Keokuk in Roughing It. Mark Twain said its virtues were its capitalization and phonetic spelling. Data is followed by a white-suited man also staying in the hotel. These pieces of text all refer to the same author, Mark Twain. We're also interested in characters. Mary Johnson and the drunkard mother refer to the same person. Jimmy is someone else, as is the protagonist. His and this man both refer to the same person, the answer to the question. Bruno Munsterberg and Alfred are two different people. In the final example, the protagonist and Sophia are two different people, and they should both be annotated. If the answer to a question doesn't fall into any of these categories, you should still mark it anyway, because this is what we're most interested in. We want the computer to be able to answer Quiz Bowl questions. For example, even though Japan is not a character, an author, or a work, it should be marked as an entity because it is an answer. If you see Japan in another question, you should ignore it because it doesn't fall into our categories of an author, a literary work, or a character. In this question, however, you should mark all the places you have text referring to Japan, which is the answer to this question. Now let's go through a complete example and consider all of the annotations you should provide for a simple question. The first coreference group is always the answer of the question, mentioned in 3 places here, referring to James Joyce. The second coreference group is the work Chamber Music, which is also referred to as a collection of 36 love poems. At this point, it's useful to point out that you don't have to get the order of the coreferences right. All that matters is you group correct coreferences together in one coherent group. So you could swap my coreference group 2 with coreference group 3. That's fine. The only number that matters is coreference group number 1, which should always refer to the answer. The third coreference group is a work, Stephen Hero, that is only mentioned once. The fourth coreference group is a character, Humphrey Chimpton, who likewise only appears once. The fifth coreference group is a work, Finnegan's Wake, which again only appears once. The sixth coreference group appears twice and refers to a portrait of the artist as a young man. And the final coreference group mentions Dubliners and Ulysses. After you've annotated all of the coreferences, you'll have highlighted much of the question. But this is the information that a computer needs to be able to process Quiz Bowl questions on its own. Now that we've talked about what things you should highlight, characters, authors, works, and the answer, let's spend a little time on how much of the text you should highlight each time one of these things is mentioned. A general rule of thumb is that you should highlight enough of the text so it could be grammatically replaced by a pronoun. The formal definition is that we want to highlight the syntactic phrase of which the mention is the head, but it's probably clearer to understand with some examples. Here we can replace this author of blah 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 works with him, and it still makes sense grammatically. Here we can replace another of his works with it, and it still makes sense. The two trickiest cases are prepositions and relative clauses. We want to highlight prepositions but not relative clauses. In this case, we have the preposition in after a play. We can't say it about or it in, so we want to replace everything with the pronoun that makes sense. So we would replace a play in which Uncle Ben, yada yada yada, living the American dream, with it, so it would still make sense. Again, about is a preposition, so in this case, we would replace this Tennessee Williams play about Blanche Dubois with it, and it would still make sense. We're going to use the convention not to highlight relative clauses. This is because you can say he who struggles, and it still makes sense. So in this example, we would only highlight this six-fingered character, because you could replace that with he. We see the same thing happening here. We would highlight this protagonist because you could replace that with he. Similarly, in this question, we would only mark this work as it forms the subject of its own clause. The whole point of Quizbowl questions is that they don't contain all of the information you need. That's why it's fun. Thus, there will often be questions where you need outside information to annotate the question. For example, in this question about the brothers Karamazov, you need to know who was whining and dining Grushenka before being arrested for Fyodor's murder. If you don't know who it was or don't want to look it up, then just skip the entire question. We want to have as many questions annotated correctly as possible. Similarly, if it's 2 a.m. and you don't feel up to annotating something tricky, we'd rather you skip the whole question so you can do a good job on another one. We've also provided a comment field under each question so you can discuss issues that you're having. Help each other out or provide additional information. We'll also be monitoring the comments so you can use the comments to report question-specific bugs. Not everyone will agree on these questions, but please make a good faith effort to annotate these questions correctly. After all, the final goal is to use what you're doing for science. As you come across issues, we'll try to answer them promptly, and we'll update the frequently asked questions. On randomly selected questions, you'll see a check accuracy button next to the answer button. This button allows you to check your accuracy against a list of confirmed coreferences. It will tell you how many coreferences you found correctly out of the total number of correct annotations. It will also show you which coreferences are correct and which are incorrect. A phrase may be marked as incorrect if you have not selected enough text or if you have selected too little text. The check accuracy button will tell you how many coreferences you are missing, but it won't tell you what those words or phrases are. You will still need to correctly identify the missing coreferences on your own and recheck the accuracy to make sure you're correct. To encourage you to participate, we're offering prizes. We'll make sure that all users pass a minimum threshold of accuracy. We haven't set the exact number, but we're thinking somewhere around getting 80% of the references in question. After we've thrown out people below that accuracy level, we'll rank the remaining users on the number of questions that they've annotated. The top 3 users will get prizes, and 6 other random users will also get gift certificates to Amazon. In addition to these monetary prizes, we hope that you'll have fun. As we've gone through to practice and debug the system, we've had to think carefully about the early clues and questions. It's caused us to think critically about how Quizbowl questions are constructed, about how people phrase and select early clues and questions, and how to find reference materials so that we can quickly figure out who's who in various novels. If you still have questions, please post in the forum, contact us through the webpage, or leave a comment on a question, and we'll try to answer and help you out as quickly as possible. Thank you very much, and happy annotating.